In my first year of marriage, when I was 22 years old, I disobeyed my husband one time, in front of 3 other men, and for the 9 days that followed, I learned what our world does to a disobedient wife. Not with shouting, not with a raised hand. Our world does not need those things. It has something older and quieter, and it works far better, and tonight I am going to tell you what it is. I did not have a word for it yet, that autumn. I have one now. But first you have to understand what disobedience even means in a plain marriage, because it is not what English people think. Nobody ever handed me a list of rules. There is no list. There is the Ordnung, which governs the church, and then beneath it, underneath everything, there is a second set of laws that no bishop ever wrote down, the laws of how a wife is with her husband, and you learn them the way you learn ice, by where it cracks. And the deepest of those laws, the bedrock one, is this. A wife does not correct her husband in front of other men. Ever. She can think he is wrong. In some houses, in the right hour, gently, at the kitchen table with the lamp low, she may even say he is wrong. But before other men, her voice belongs to his side, the way her name belongs to his name. When a wife contradicts her husband in front of men, she has not embarrassed him. She has unmanned him. That is the word my grandmother used, and I never forgot it. I knew that law. Every plain girl knows that law before she knows her letters, and I broke it anyway, on a Thursday in October, over a horse. We were at the Yoder farm, because Amos meant to buy a driving horse, and old Yoder was selling one, a big, handsome standardbred, and the deacon was there, and Yoder's grown son, 4 men around a horse, and me on the porch with Yoder's wife, close enough to hear. Now, my father dealt in horses my whole girlhood. I was raised on hoof and hock the way other girls are raised on batter and thread, and I could see from the porch, plain as morning, that the horse was lame coming up on the left front. Not badly. The kind of lame a seller can warm out of a horse for 20 minutes, the kind that comes creeping back in a month. And I watched my new husband, who is a good farmer and was never once in his life a horseman, walk around that animal nodding, and I heard the price old Yoder wanted, and I saw the deacon nodding along, and something in me stood straight up. And I came off that porch, and I walked across the yard into that circle of men, and I said, Amos, look at the left front. She is short on it. Ask him why. I can still hear it. Not what I said. The silence after. Yoder's son looking at his boots to keep from smiling. The deacon looking at Amos. Everyone looking at Amos, and no one looking at me. Because in that moment, I had stopped existing, and the only question in the yard was what my husband's face would do. He did not buy the horse. We rode home without one word, and I sat beside him telling myself I had saved us from a lame animal and a bad bargain, and that he knew it, and that it would be all right by supper. It was not all right by supper. And now I will tell you what our world does, because this is the part no one outside has ever seen. He did not shout at me. He has never shouted at me in his life. He hung up the harness, and washed at the basin, and sat down at my table, and said grace, and ate my food. And he did not speak to me. Not that evening, not the next morning, not that whole first day, or the second, or the third. I do not mean he was cold in the way English couples are cold, slamming the doors, the hard sighs, nothing so loud. He answered direct questions with the fewest words a question can be answered with. He said please and thank you like a boarder in my kitchen, a polite stranger renting space in my marriage, and everything that needed deciding between us suddenly traveled through other people. He told his brother, in my hearing, that they would butcher Tuesday so that I would know to be ready. He told his mother the fence money had come in so that she would tell me. I stood in my own house listening to my own life being spoken around me, the way you speak around a child or a hired girl. That is what is done. That is the whole punishment, and I promise you, you cannot imagine it until you have stood inside it. The silence is not an absence, it is a presence. It sits at the table, it lies down in the bed between you like a plank of green oak. And the worst of it, the part that nearly broke me, is that it is invisible. Church came that Sunday and we rode to it side by side, and he handed me down from the buggy like a gentleman, and not one soul in that congregation could have seen anything wrong, and I sang the hymns with a stone where my chest used to be. On the 6th day there was a quilting at the Stoltzfus place, and I went, because not going would have said more than going. And I learned something that day that I have never forgotten, which is that the women always know. Nobody had told them. Amos had certainly told no one, and I had told no one, and it did not matter. There is a code among plain women, older than any of us, and it is read in the smallest things. Ruth Stoltzfus put me at the good corner of the frame, the east corner, where the light is best, which is where you put a woman who is being punished at home, so that she has one place in her week where she is honored. Nobody announced it. She just put her hand on that chair and looked at me. And old Barbara, who had buried 2 husbands and feared nothing on this earth, threaded her needle and said, "To the quilt, not to me, when mine went quiet on me, I used to sing while I worked." He hated that I could sing. And all the thimbles went up and down, and one by one, without ever once saying the word silence, without ever once saying the word husband, half the women at that frame told me, in the code, that they had lived it too, and were living it, and had outlived it. I rode home from that quilting stronger than I rode to it. Our world gives its men the silence, but it gives its women each other, and to this day I could not tell you which is the stronger tool. There is more of this story than I can fit into one evening at this window. What my mother said when I went to her at the end of the first week, and what my grandmother said after her, which was the opposite thing, and the one sentence of hers that I have carried ever since. I set all of it down in my book, A Quiet and Faithful Home, everything I have learned about marriage and duty, and keeping your own soul alive under a plain roof. It is in the first pinned comment below. But do not go yet, because I have not told you about the 9th day, and the thing I found in the barn, and if you leave now, you will think this is a story about a hard man, and it is not. It is stranger than that. I went to my mother at the end of the first week, because a girl does, even a married one. And my mother heard the whole of it with her hands in the wash water, and she did not take them out. And when I finished, she said, "Well then, make it right. Go to him tonight and say you spoke out of turn, and it will be over by morning." And when I said, "But Mem, I was right about the horse," my mother did something I had seen her do my whole girlhood, and never once understood until that moment. She turned her face to the window, just for a breath, and I saw 25 years of made-it-rights pass over it like weather, every one of them swallowed at some kitchen table before I was ever born. And then she turned back and said, "Right has nothing to do with married," and went on wringing the sheets. That was my mother's whole teaching. It kept her marriage 40 years, and I have wondered all my life what it cost to keep it. It was my grandmother, 2 days later, who gave me the other teaching, the one I have carried instead. But I will come to her. By the 8th day I had stopped being sorry and started being angry, which my mother could have told him would happen, because silence works on a guilty heart, but I no longer felt guilty, I felt wronged. I had been right about the horse. Everyone knew I had been right about the horse. And on the 8th night, I lay awake beside a sleeping man I was no longer sure I liked, thinking thoughts a plain wife is not supposed to think, about the years ahead, and the length of a life, and how quiet a house can get. And then, on the 9th day, I went out to the barn to look for a crock my mother-in-law wanted, and I found my husband standing in the far doorway with the light behind him, and he did not hear me come in. And he was talking, low, half under his breath, the way men talk when they are alone and working something loose. And I stopped in the dark by the grain bins, and I listened, and I am not ashamed of it, because what I heard gave me back my marriage. He was practicing, out loud, to the horses, to the empty barn. He was trying to build the sentence that would end it, and he could not build it. I heard him start, 3 times, 4. You were right about the no. A man cannot say to his wife you were right about the horse, because the horse was never the wound. I heard him try, what you did at Yoder's, and stop, and breathe. And I heard him say, to nobody, to the dusty light of that barn, so quietly I nearly missed it. They will laugh at me at the auction until I am dead. And then, after a long time, he said, but she was right, and I have made her a stranger for it, and I do not know the way back. I do not know the way back. I stood in the dark with my hand over my mouth, and my anger fell off me like water off a roof all at once, because I finally understood what I was actually married to. Not a tyrant, a prisoner. The same laws that had spent 9 days crushing me had spent those 9 days crushing him too. He had been shamed in front of the deacon by his own wife, and the law of the men said he could not simply laugh, wave it off, say my Sadie has the best eye for a horse in the district, which was true, and which some braver man in some easier world might have said. And the law also would not let him come to me and say the wound out loud. You hurt me in the one place a man like me cannot be hurt. So the law gave him the only tool it gives them, the silence. And the silence I understood in that barn doorway was not him refusing to speak to me. It was him not knowing how, and hating himself, and calling that hating discipline. The old ones knew exactly what they had built. My grandmother said it to me later that same month, and this is the sentence I have carried. She said, Sadie, the fence that keeps the wife in her place keeps the husband in his, and neither one of them chose where the fence stands, and the sooner you pity him for it, the sooner you will be warm again. The sooner you pity him for it. Not obey him harder, not fight him longer, pity him, because he is inside it too. So here is what I did, and you may judge me for it however you like. I did not apologize, because I was not sorry about the horse, and I do not say words I do not mean, even to keep peace. That is my own private disobedience, and it lives where no deacon can inspect it. Instead, that evening I made Rivel soup, which is what his mother made him when he was small, and I set his bowl down, and I put my hand flat on the table beside it, where a wife's hand simply says, I am here, and I said, the Zimmermans have a gelding coming up for sale after harvest. You should look at it. And I paused, and I said, you always know a sound one when you see it. It was a door, built so a proud man could walk through it. He looked at the soup for a moment, and then he said, first words to me in 9 days. Well, maybe you would come along and look with me. Maybe you would come along and look with me. That was his whole apology, and I knew what it had cost, and I took it, and we never once spoke of Yoder's yard again. But I will tell you the true ending, and then I am done, and it is the reason I can tell this story without bitterness. 3 autumns later, I was in the back of the fabric store in town, behind the shelves, and I heard the deacon on the other side, needling my husband, the way men do to see if a bruise is still tender. Something about, better bring the wife to check its feet for you. Little laugh in his voice, and I heard Amos say, flat and calm as a Monday, God gave her the eye. I would be a fool to buy a horse without her, and a bigger fool to care that you know it. He never learned that I heard. He will go to his grave not knowing. And that is the man that came out of the man the silence built, and it took him 3 years to grow that one sentence, and I have loved him without 1 day's interruption since the moment I heard it through a shelf of dress fabric. So, what are Amish husbands allowed to do to a disobedient wife? Everything I lived through in those 9 days, and I learned it in my first year, and half the wives at any quilting could tell you the same story with different weather in it. The silence, the stranger at your own table, your life handed around you like a dish you are not offered. It is real, and it is cruel in its quiet way, and it is the fence we all live inside. But I learned the other thing too, standing in that barn dark, and it is the thing I want to leave with you tonight, especially the young wives, especially any woman living inside her own 9th day right now. The fence stands around him too, and sometimes the strongest thing a wife can do is not to push the fence over, because it will not go, and not to press herself against it until she bleeds, but to reach across it with a bold